I want you to think about something for a second. Somewhere in your house, right now, there's an old notebook or a folder on your phone, or maybe just a memory of an idea you had, a business, a song, a YouTube channel, a book you wanted to write, and you never touched it again. Not because you didn't have time, not because you didn't have the money. You stopped because of one sentence that played in your head on repeat. What will people think of me? I remember a friend of mine, a really talented singer, who recorded one video, watched it 50 times, and deleted it before anyone else could. 50 times. Alone. In her room. That's not laziness. That's fear wearing a disguise. Today, we're going to talk about why the fear of judgment is one of the quietest, most dangerous dream killers there is. And by the end, you're going to understand exactly how it works inside your mind, so you can finally stop letting it win. Before we start, can I ask you one question? A year from now, will your English be better than it is today, or will you still be saying, "I'll start next week"? The truth is, most people don't fail because English is difficult. They fail because they never truly commit to it. That's why, for a limited time, I've reduced the price of the Native Flow English coaching experience to just $5. Not because it's worth only $5, but because I don't want money to be the reason you never start. For less than the price of a coffee, you can begin building a skill that can stay with you for the rest of your life. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Click the link in the description. Join us today, and I'll see you inside. Now, let's begin today's lesson. Reason 1. Your brain thinks judgment is a physical threat. Here's something most people don't know, and honestly, when I first learned it, it changed the way I saw my own anxiety completely. Your brain does not fully separate social pain from physical pain. There's real research on this from neuroscientists studying something called social rejection, and they found that when people are excluded or judged, the exact same part of the brain lights up as when someone feels physical pain. The same region, not a similar one, the same one. So when you imagine posting that video, or pitching that idea in a meeting, or telling your family you're quitting your stable job to try something new, your brain isn't just being dramatic. It genuinely believes on some old ancient level that you are in danger, real danger, like you're about to be thrown out of the tribe and left alone in the wilderness with no food and no protection. Think about where humans come from. For most of our history, being rejected by your group wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a death sentence. If the tribe judged you, mocked you, or cast you out, you didn't have Uber Eats and a backup plan. You had nothing, so your brain built a very powerful alarm system. And that alarm system is still running today, except now it's going off because you're scared to post a video of yourself talking about your favorite hobby. I had a client once, well, not a client exactly, a friend who was starting her own small jewelry business. She told me the moment she felt the most fear wasn't when she was designing the pieces or even pricing them. It was the moment right before she pressed post on Instagram for the first time. Her hands were literally shaking. She told me later, "I felt like I was standing on a stage naked in front of my entire high school." That's the ancient alarm system talking, not logic, not reason, just old wiring. And here's the tricky part, because this fear feels so real, so physical, so urgent, we treat it like a warning sign that something is truly wrong. We think, if I feel this much fear, it must mean I shouldn't do this. But that's backwards. The fear isn't telling you the idea is bad. It's telling you the idea is meaningful. If it didn't matter to you, your brain wouldn't bother sounding the alarm at all. This is why so many dreams die in complete silence. Not because someone laughed at them, not because someone actually criticized them. They die before anyone even sees them because the person imagines the judgment so vividly, so many times in their own head, that they experience the pain of rejection without a single other human being ever being involved. You reject yourself first, so nobody else gets the chance to. Understanding this one fact, that your brain confuses judgment with danger, is the first step to loosening its grip. Because once you know the alarm is outdated, you can start asking a better question. Not, why am I so scared? But, is this fear actually protecting me from something real, or is it just an old system misfiring? Most of the time, especially with dreams, it's the second one. Reason 2. We treat other people's opinions like facts. There's a strange habit almost all of us have, and we rarely notice we're doing it. We take someone else's opinion, something that exists only in their head, shaped by their mood, their background, their insecurities, and we treat it like it's an objective truth about who we are. Let me give you an example from my own life. A few years ago, I showed an early draft of something I was working on to a small group of people. One person said, "I don't really get it." That's it. 4 words. And I carried that sentence around with me for weeks. I replayed it before I went to sleep. I thought about it while I was cooking dinner. 4 words from one person on one day in one particular mood somehow became the final verdict on whether my idea was worth pursuing. But here's what I didn't think about at the time. That person had their own bad day, their own bias toward a completely different style, their own limited context, because they only saw 10 minutes of something I had been building for months. Their opinion wasn't a fact, it was a snapshot of one person's momentary reaction, and I treated it like a scientific measurement. This happens to almost everyone chasing a dream. You show your business plan to a relative who's never started a business, and they say, "That's risky." And suddenly you feel like the whole thing is doomed. You post a video and one comment is negative, and that single comment outweighs 50 positive ones in your mind. Psychologists actually have a name for this pattern. It's related to something called negativity bias. Our brains are simply wired to give more weight to negative information than positive information. It's not your fault, it's built in, but it's also not accurate. Think about it logically for a second. If 10,000 people watch your video and 9,900 love it, and 100 people don't, where does your mind go at 3 in the morning? Straight to the 100. Every single time. That's not because the 100 represent the truth. It's because your brain is designed to scan for threats, and criticism registers as a threat, even when it's statistically insignificant. I think about my friend who makes pottery. She once told me that for every piece she posts online, she gets maybe 1 or 2 comments that are harsh, sometimes even cruel, out of hundreds that are kind. And she said something that stuck with me. She said, "I used to let the one cruel comment cancel out 200 kind ones. Now I ask myself, would I let a stranger's 5-second opinion decide what I do with my hands for the next 10 years? When she put it that way, it sounded almost absurd. But that's exactly what so many of us do, every single day, without questioning it. The truth is, an opinion is not evidence. It's not a prediction of the future. It's just a reflection of the person who said it, filtered through their own life, their own fears, their own limitations. When you start separating, this is someone's opinion from this is a fact about me, something shifts. You stop handing over the steering wheel of your dream to people who were never going to drive it anyway. Reason 3. Nobody is watching you as closely as you think. This next idea might be a little uncomfortable at first, but stay with me because it's actually one of the most freeing things you'll ever learn. There's a concept in psychology called the spotlight effect. It describes our tendency to believe that people notice us, remember us, and judge us far more than they actually do. Researchers tested this in a fairly funny way. They had a college student wear an embarrassing t-shirt, one with a picture of a musician most people would consider uncool, and walk into a room full of other students. Before walking in, the student guessed that about half the room would notice and remember the shirt. In reality, less than a quarter did, and most of them forgot about it within minutes. The student, meanwhile, felt like everyone was staring, like it was the most important detail in the room. It wasn't, not even close. Now apply that to your dream. You imagine posting your first video and picture hundreds of people zooming in on every mistake, every awkward pause, every imperfect sentence. But think honestly about your own behavior. When was the last time you deeply, critically analyzed a stranger's video for more than 30 seconds? Be honest. Most of us scroll past 10 videos in the time it takes to make a cup of coffee. We're not sitting there taking notes on other people's flaws. We're thinking about our own lives, our own problems, our own to-do lists. I remember the first time I ever spoke in front of a group of adults years ago at a small community event. I was convinced everyone in that room would remember exactly what I said, how nervous my voice sounded, how my hands trembled a little when I held the microphone. Weeks later, I ran into someone who had been there. I asked, half joking, half terrified, if they remembered my talk. They smiled and said, "You spoke? I actually don't really remember. Sorry, that day is a bit of a blur for me." That sentence, "that day is a bit of a blur for me," taught me more about human attention than any book ever could. People are simply too busy living their own lives, carrying their own worries, thinking about their own relationships, their own bills, their own insecurities, to spend much energy analyzing yours. The audience you imagine in your head sitting silently, judging every move you make, mostly doesn't exist. It's a projection. It's your own fear wearing the costume of other people. This doesn't mean nobody will ever have an opinion. Some will. But the intensity, the constant, focused, permanent judgment you imagine, that version simply isn't real. Most people will see your video, your business, your art for a few seconds, form a vague impression, and move on with their day, thinking about what they're going to eat for dinner. When you truly understand that, the pressure loosens, not because people don't matter, but because you realize the spotlight you've been performing under this whole time was mostly built by you. Reason 4. Perfectionism is just fear. Wearing a nicer outfit. A lot of people who struggle with fear of judgment don't actually call it fear. They call it something else. They call it being a perfectionist. They say things like, "I just want it to be really good before I share it," or "I'm still polishing it," or "It's not ready yet." And on the surface, that sounds responsible. It sounds like patience. It sounds like high standards. But very often, underneath that polished language, there's the exact same fear we've been talking about this whole time, just wearing a nicer outfit. I say this with love because I've done it myself. I once spent almost a year preparing to start something, reading books about it, watching tutorials about it, making plans about it, telling myself I just needed to learn a little more first. A year. And when I look back honestly, it wasn't really about preparation. It was about avoiding the moment where something imperfect, something with my name on it, would exist out in the world where people could see it and judge it. Perfectionism feels safe because it keeps the dream in a protected space, inside your head, or in a draft folder, where it can never fail and it can never be criticized. As long as the video isn't posted, nobody can say it's bad. As long as the business hasn't launched, nobody can say it failed. Perfectionism lets you feel like you're working toward the dream while actually protecting yourself from the vulnerable moment of finally showing it. But here's the hard truth nobody likes to hear. Nothing you ever make will feel completely ready. Not your first video, not your 100th video. I've talked to creators with millions of subscribers who still cringe a little watching their early content. And you know what? They also cringe a little at content from last year. That feeling doesn't fully go away. What changes is your relationship with it. Successful people don't wait until fear disappears. They act while the fear is still sitting right there next to them. Think about learning a language, actually, since that's exactly what you're doing right now, listening to me. If you waited until your grammar was perfect before you spoke a single sentence out loud, you would never speak. Not in a year, not in 5 years. The only way language actually develops is through imperfect, sometimes embarrassing, real attempts. The mistakes aren't the obstacle blocking fluency. The mistakes are the actual process of becoming fluent. The exact same thing is true for your dream, whatever it is. There's a particular kind of freedom that comes from releasing something imperfect on purpose. Not carelessly, not without effort, but with the understanding that good enough and real beats perfect and imaginary every single time. Perfect, after all, only exists in your imagination. It has never once existed in the real world, not in a single film, not in a single book, not in a single business anyone has ever built. So chasing it isn't actually chasing quality. Often, quietly, secretly, it's chasing an excuse to never be seen. Reason 5, the dream doesn't die loudly. It fades in silence. I want to end with something important, something people rarely talk about. Most dreams don't die in one dramatic moment. Nobody usually stands in front of a crowd, gets humiliated, and gives up on the spot. That's not how it actually happens in real life for most people. Dreams die quietly, slowly, in private, one small avoidance at a time. It looks like this. You think about starting. You feel the fear. You tell yourself, not today, I'm tired. That happens again the next day. And the next. Weeks pass, then months. And slowly, the idea that used to excite you starts to feel distant, almost embarrassing to even bring up anymore. Not because it failed. It never even got the chance to fail. It simply got buried quietly under 1,000 small days of avoidance, each one justified by a small, reasonable-sounding excuse. I think about my grandfather sometimes, actually. He used to talk about wanting to build furniture, real handmade furniture, when he was young. He had the skills, he had a small workshop. But every time he thought about actually selling a piece, showing it to people outside his family, some quiet voice told him, "What if they think it's amateur? What if a real craftsman looks at it and laughs?" He never sold a single piece, not because anyone judged him, because he judged himself silently for decades before anyone else ever had the chance to. That story isn't rare. It's actually incredibly common. The fear of judgment is dangerous precisely because it doesn't feel dramatic while it's happening. It feels reasonable. It feels responsible. It whispers instead of shouting. Maybe next month. Maybe when I have more time. Maybe when I'm more confident. And each whisper sounds so calm, so logical, that you don't even realize you're slowly walking away from something that mattered to you. So here's what I want you to take from today. The fear you feel isn't a sign that you should stop. It's usually a sign that you're standing right at the edge of something meaningful. Your ancient brain will keep sounding the alarm. People's opinions will keep showing up, and some of them, occasionally, will sting. But most people are far too busy living their own lives to study yours as closely as you imagine. And perfect was never actually available to you or to anyone else who's ever created something real. The real danger was never the judgment itself. The real danger is the silence that comes after you decide not to try. The years that pass with the idea sitting untouched in a notebook or a folder, or just a quiet memory you stopped mentioning out loud. So whatever it is you've been putting off, whatever version of yourself has been waiting for permission that was never actually going to come from anyone else, maybe today's the day that quiet voice gets a little quieter and you finally get a little louder.